Welcome! In this series of short videos, we will look at topics for the PowerBasic Windows compiler. Today we will look again at the use of scroll bars on Windows forms using macros. This was our application at the end of the last video. We have a dialog containing a number of large text boxes, and our addition of scroll bars on the dialog allows us to scroll down the dialog and see those objects which are not fully visible when the dialog is initially shown, either vertically or horizontally. While these changes to the application work very well, there is a great deal of code that needs to be put in to the application in order to get this to work. So if you are setting this up for a number of dialogues, it could be quite laborious. So we're going to look at macros to cut down on the amount of code you need to type into your application. If we have a look at the callback function of our dialog, we will see there are a number of sections in here which we have added code in order to affect the scrolling dialog. The first part is the setting up of the local variables and the population of those values. We're going to create a new include file which is going to contain 3 macros. The first macro we will create is one to handle the initialization of all of these variables. So let's go ahead and create our new file. So we're going to call our file mscrollbars.include, and we're going to save that into our libraries folder. And we're going to create our first macro, the one that's going to contain all the text and code that's currently in the initialize variables section. So all we need to do is to select that text. So we will select all of that text and remove it from our application. And we will paste that text into our new macro. So now we have our first macro populated, a straightforward cut and paste job. To make use of this macro in the main callback function, we merely have to make a call to the macro name. In pasting in the name of this macro, what will happen when PowerBasic attempts to compile this application is it will replace this macro name with the content of the macro, which means to initialize all these variables in any other dialogues, we merely have to paste in the name of the macro. It makes your code look much cleaner and saves a great deal of typing. So further down the callback function, we have an initialize dialog section, in where we're actually populating a number of values. We're going to remove all of these and create yet another macro in our include file to set up the scroll bar initialization. And we're going to call this macro scroll bar init. So as we did before, we will quite simply cut out all the code that does this initialization. And we will paste that code into our macro. And having pasted the code into the macro, we'll now copy the name of the macro into our main application. So now that we've effectively created 2 new macros to handle the initialization of the variables and the initialization of the scroll bar, we need to include this macro include file at the beginning of our application. So now that we've referenced the include file at the beginning of our application, let's try running the application to ensure it works properly. Our code compiles, we have the text boxes on screen, and the dialog scrolls quite happily vertically and horizontally. So the remaining bits of the code we need to put into our macro include file are the 2 events for the horizontal scroll and the vertical scroll. As we've seen, they do involve a fair amount of text. So in our library, we will create a new macro to handle these events. And we'll call that new macro scroll bar events. So just as we did before, this is a cut and paste job. We will select all the text to handle the horizontal scroll. We will remove that from our main application code. And we will find the code for our vertical scroll. And we will remove that also. And we're going to paste that into our new macro. So now that we've taken that fair amount of code out, we merely have to take the name of our macro and paste that into our code. This will appear at the end of the initialization because this is beginning of all the case statements. So now that we have all three macros set up, let's try running the application once more. It compiles quite cleanly, and it still manages to scroll both vertically and horizontally. So we've managed to simplify the code in setting up a scrolling dialog. Our scrolling at the moment is done entirely using the mouse, moving the thumb, clicking on the scroll bar, or using the up and down arrows. There is one additional bit of scrolling we can actually do. The majority of mice these days appear with a scroll wheel. At the moment we don't actually support the scroll wheel, so let's amend our code to detect when the user actually uses the scroll wheel on the mouse to scroll up and down, left and right. So rather than put this code into our main application, we'll put it into the macro events. In order to keep track of our mouse wheel scrolling, we're going to have to create 3 new variables. So we'll put that into the macro that initializes the variables. We'll be using a static variable to keep track of the vertical or horizontal scrolling change, and 2 additional macros, long M and long K, to keep track of the movement. So having prepped these variables, we'll now have to change the macro events to add on an additional event or 2 for our scroll bar using the mouse wheel. So the first event we're going to keep track of is the middle button, to see whether the middle button has indeed been pressed. We're going to use this as a toggle, to toggle between scrolling up and down or left and right. So this will be what we're using the long D for. This will be a straightforward toggle. Now we have to detect the amount of movement on the mouse wheel. This will be making use of long D. If long D is -1, then our movement is going to be vertical. If the value of long D is anything other than -1, then we're going to be doing horizontal movement. This makes use of the mouse wheel event. So in here, we're going to be testing the value of long D to see whether it's -1 or not. And we're going to be doing exactly the same approach as we did with the clicking of the thumb of the scroll bar. We're going to be picking up the scroll information using the getScrollInfo API call for vertical. We're storing the old position, and we're adjusting the position of the scroll bar itself by using the long V multiplied by 3 multiplied by long K. You can adjust this if the scroll bar speed needs to be slowed up or increased in speed. And down at the bottom of this code is the part where we set the scroll info to set the scroll bar, and we use the scroll window API call to move the window up or down. This is almost exactly like the code we did on the main scroll bar. And if we're doing horizontal, we'll do exactly the same thing, only horizontally. And now that we've got the code for the horizontal scrolling in, let's try running the code itself. We don't have to make any further changes to the main code because it's still using those macros, and all our changes have been in the macros file. So our application runs quite happily with the text boxes on screen. We can still scroll up and down using the thumb or widget on the scroll bar, and left and right. And now if we click on the middle mouse button underneath the scroll wheel, one click will allow you to change the direction from up and down to left and right, and a further click will allow you to change to up and down. So now you can scroll entirely without having to move the mouse, just using the mouse wheel. So what we've done today is we've taken a large amount of code in our main basic file. We've moved that into a macro include file and added that include file as an include at the beginning of our main code file. This keeps the amount of code in the main code file to a minimum and makes it very easy to add this to other applications, now that this is effectively a library. Hopefully you'll find this code useful in your applications, but that's it for today. Thank you for watching.